I've taken up the challenge of completing all the games in the Japanese catalogue of the Sega Saturn. Although my Japanese language skills are rusty, I am determined to painfully translate my way through each game to achieve my goal. So come along with me on this adventure. Game number 7, Virtual Hydlide. Developed by T&E Soft, published by Sega in Japan and in Europe, and Atlus in the US. Released in April 1995 in Japan, September 1995 in the US, and December 1995 in Europe. I was looking forward to this one. Ask anybody and they will tell you that this is one of the worst games of the Saturn. Spoiler alert, I might have a controversial opinion. The game starts with a full motion video as it was customary at the time. It's not very clear, but it looks like the princess was transformed into 3 fairies. I take a quick look at the options before starting. There are 3 difficulty settings, the default one being easy. On easy difficulty, the whole map is revealed and the next objective is shown. On medium, the map is not revealed, but the next objective is shown. On hard, the next objective is not indicated. I think I'll leave it on easy. When starting a new game, a code is generated and that drives the layout of the world and dungeons. I actually played through the game twice. The first time, I rushed to the last boss and it turned out I didn't have the only weapon that could beat him. I was also missing 3 of the jewels, which meant I had no chance of completing the game. We'll start straight at the second playthrough, that's why I'm already 3 hours in. This is how the game starts. You might be surprised by the bleeding edge graphics and lightning fast frame rate. The first objective is to go to a cemetery to collect the first of 3 jewels. The first weapon is a dagger and it's not efficient at all. Killing enemies gives you points which can be used to trade against equipment later or just as a way to get the highest score. We then head to the vampire manor. Here we have to check all the rooms and activate 5 of those orb things to open the door to the boss. On the way, we collect a new sword. We can finally get rid of that dagger. We encountered those bats which are weak but can be quite annoying at times. The first boss is a vampire. Each boss mumbles something before attacking you. Let me know in the comments if you understand that language. In order to beat this guy, we need to equip the crucifix, which blesses all our weapons. Otherwise, attacking him would have no effect. Beating him is not too difficult. Before going to the next dungeon, I tried looking for a trading point, which should be one of those yellow dots. Visiting the first dot, I stumbled upon a forest and found the first fairy. I actually got this one last on my first playthrough. The second dot I visit is a trading point. Perfect. Here we can trade points for weapons, shields, armors, rings, special items, scrolls and meds. I get a ring of spirit in order to regain health while moving around, a scroll in order to reveal all the treasures on a given dungeon map, and an axe as I was told this was the best weapon. That turned out to be a mistake as it was too heavy to equip, and it ended up being too heavy to carry as well, so I had to ditch it in the middle of nowhere. Moving on to the next dungeon, the Caverns of Trial. We have to use the item we got when we beat the vampire, a lamp, and also use a scroll to reveal all the chests, now showing us blue dots on the map. At the end of the dungeon, we find 2 chests, one containing a dragon shield and the other the Spectacles of Truth. On to the next dungeon. Here we have to use our newly acquired Spectacles of Truth in order to reveal the entry to a maze. As usual, we reveal all the chests and off we go. We found the fairy armor, which I believe is the best light armor of the game. Then we came across the hero sword, which is one of the best weapons. Finally we collect the fire amulet, which was the objective of this dungeon. Here I felt lazy, so instead of backtracking all the way back to the entrance of the maze, I just consumed a tear of a fairy, which just teleported me there. The next dungeon is the Scorching Caverns. We have to equip the fire amulet we just got in order to protect us from the heat. Again, we reveal all the treasure chests and there are quite a lot to collect this time. I found a fire sword which allows me to shoot enemies from afar. I also found the second jewel, a red emerald. Here I made a big mistake. I had this unidentified shield in my inventory and one way to identify weapons and armors is to equip them. I did that and it turned out to be a cursed shield. Having a curse meant my health would keep going down and I wasn't sure how to get rid of it. Because the shield was cursed, I couldn't unequip it or throw it away either. I ended up dying stupidly against the fire dragon at the end of the dungeon and having to load a previous save, which caused my score to be reset to 0, meaning all the precious gold I had gathered was for nothing and I wouldn't be able to buy more equipment to make the game easier. The most efficient way to beat the fire dragon is to use the jet black sword, which uses 10 points to fire a projectile. My score had just been reset, so it was a close fight. Here I made the second blunder. I used the Tear of Fairy to go back to the beginning of the dungeon, but I had forgotten to collect the item dropped by the dragon. So I had to backtrack my way back to the boss area, collect the item, the Flute of Zaludosu, and then walk my way back to the entrance again, as I didn't have any more Tear of Fairy items. Anyway, next dungeon. We have to play the flute we just acquired here to open the gates to the Sealed Caverns. This is the biggest dungeon with multiple levels, but it's actually not as difficult as the previous one, as I could just wear the Ring of Spirit and not worry about my health too much. I collect all the treasure chests, get on a cart, and then get to the boss, a wizard. He is not too difficult to beat, he just floats around and he is only vulnerable when he touches the ground. It took a while, but we beat him and we were rewarded with the Tear of High Ground and a second fairy. I was out of fairy tears here, so I had to backtrack all the way to the entrance. Not a big deal, but a bit tedious. We used the last item we collected to reveal the Lost Palace. The first part is like a crystal maze. The pink platforms send us one level up, the yellow ones one level down. Getting to the top and center doesn't present much of a challenge. The second part is like an alien spaceship. It's a bit of a maze, but we eventually found the Sword of Light, the most powerful weapon of the game, required to beat the last boss. We buff it straight away with some warrior stones. We also found the last jewel, a green emerald. We made our way to the boss of this dungeon, an eel. It is no match for the Sword of Light though. We get the third fairy and we are transported to the last bit of our adventure, the fort of Varalis. We needed to beat 2 bosses we'd already beaten. They were not even stronger, so that was quite easy. Or at least it should have been. I was tired and impatient, which caused me to be killed by bats. I had also forgotten to save recently, so I ended up back at the entrance of the Lost Palace. I was determined to finish the game in that session though, so I took a sip of coffee and went back to it. I eventually beat the vampire and the evil mage. The last boss, Varalis, mumbles something very slowly. We fight and I destroy him. Obligatory FMV sequence where our hero has lost his armor somehow and the 3 fairies are transformed back into the princess. She's happy. They are teleported back to some countryside by a green screen and roll credits. I'll be honest, I was expecting a lot worse than that. I'm almost certain the Saturn is capable of better performance than that, and the low frame rate is probably due to the fact that they were unable to fully use the complex architecture of the Saturn. The game was released a few months after the Saturn was launched, and it feels like some aspect might have been rushed. If only the framerate wasn't so bad, I'm sure it would have got better reviews. I'm going to give it a C, as I did enjoy myself a little bit. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching, and here is a preview on what's coming next. 994 games left. 3, 2, 1... Zakombini! I was looking forward to this one actually. I think that's a management game.